Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo
proporre con la propria vita
esiste anche grazie a te.
Allora, buongiorno a tutti e grazie per essere qui a questo incontro.
Thank you very much for being here. This meeting is titled Living Stones. Who better than an architect can tell us the value of these stones? So I would like to thank Mario Botta wholeheartedly for accepting the invitation of the meeting and for having traveled such a long journey from Switzerland to be with us today. Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much. Mario Botta is one of the most important architects at international level of today. Talking about architecture with him means talking about man, his roots and his values. He was born in 1943 in Mendrisio, and he comes from the Italian Switzerland canton, where Maderno, Fontana and Borromini were also born. He graduated in Venice in 1969 in architecture, and those were masters such as Le Corbusier, who inspired his style. You find many of his works in many countries of the world. And so the Seoul Tower, synagogue in Tel Aviv, and many churches designed in every corner of the earth, Ukraine, China, France, America. And I like to remember the Monio Church, that of San Buceto, the Evry Cathedral close to Paris, and Santa Maria degli Angeli on the Tamaro Mountain, where the famous Enzo Cucchi also intervened. In 1996, he founded the Mendrisio Academy, which trained thousands of students. Botta sees a world in its essential elements, without any frills, in the simplicity of its primary structures that have to do with light, earth, water, and air. He goes to the heart of things. Designing, to him, is an ethical practice even before being a profession. Building a building where you can pray, you can live, means focusing on man rather than on technology. And he says, if I could, I would choose to build only places of worship. For Mario Botta, the sacred spaces represent an interval vis-à-vis the conventions of everyday existence, a space that has to dialogue and with the existences, with the lives, and introducing all the languages of the contemporary architecture, able to create a difference between the finite and the infinite. To him, who confronted with every form and representation of town, building the house of the Lord is a way to rethink the house of man. So architect, let's start from this meeting's title, which perfectly fits with your work. In the vacant places we will build with new bricks. Placing a brick after another is a simple gesture that man has always done, transforming, as you say, a natural condition into a cultural condition. So I would like to ask you, what is your desire? What is the ideal when you design a project? What are the new bricks with which you try and build our present? Well, first of all, I would like to thank you very much for the invite, for having me here. And I would like to thank a journalist who, as you heard, has already started my activity with lots of generosity. And I would like to thank you for your very kind words. I would try and answer spontaneously but directly to your questions. so that we can have a further dialogue, and I can answer other questions. So what's your ideal? What's the ideal moving you when you start? The idea that lightens up in your mind. Well, passion. Therefore, when I was very little, well, I was born after a pregnancy of 8 months, so I was very fragile. My health was very fragile. I was very, very weak. So I've always played within the house. I lived in a farmer's house. My origins are very modest, and I used to play with all the objects I found in the house. So drawing was the first tool that I had to express myself. And then life led me to choose to study architecture rather than painting or rather than studying photography. So that's a series of circumstances that I didn't look for. I was not aware critically about the perspectives, but my choice then enabled me to start this profession, and my profession also became a passion and also a prison, I have to say. Well, now, you cannot but do what you do. When you reach a certain critical awareness of the living, of the life, the profession and the passion also becomes an ethical kind of commitment. So for good or bad, you are sort of a prison of this passion. So you're imprisoned in this passion. However, this passion, as the Germans would say, is a Weltanschauung, the vision of the world. And this is a passion which is also able to absorb the variables of the life that exist. So it is a profession that enables you every day to invent, because you have to invent, because the context of this life changes every day. So in our everyday actions, I realize that these days are different from the days of 1 week ago. So you feel, you perceive all the problems of the world. I wake up in the morning, I listen to some breaking news on the radio, and each time it's a blow that you get. You cannot live in the entertainment society only thinking about consuming things. There's another side of to your life which imposes you to realize the world you're living in. It imposes you to take stock of all the problems that exist in the world. So, and this, when you are confronted with the white sheet of paper, you are influenced by what you hear. You're influenced by the news. The writing does not change. The writing is contained within my pencil. I still draw using the pencil. However, the conditions for acting have changed in our world. And this is probably also the difficult part, interpreting every time a house or a church or a factory that solves some functional problems, because the main moment, the main reason for which you build is because you have to meet a requirement. And you meet the requirement for a function. You need to develop this need in the atmosphere and in the context in which you're living, both historical context and territorial context. So you stated architecture has become the realization of the business that supports it. It was once at the service of man. It was thought to think, produce, sleep. It has become a standard to meet the only need to produce a plus, a value, which goes beyond function. At this point of my life, as you stated, I would only design churches because architecture has been deprived of the needful spirit, which has always animated the refuges for man. Why has this sacred dimension become so significant for your work, and how did your personal history lead you to reflect on the importance of the sacred element? Let's start from the profane element. Well, as for the profane, our growth and the development of the world is not indifferent from the artistic form or the expression that is demanded to architects, musicians, or painters. We need to respond every time, bearing in mind the historical and social context that is existing. And I need to say that I am very upset by the current historical era we're living. As you said, everything is becoming a business. In a certain sense, I'm very worried about the situation, and in my everyday work, I do not live so well. When I think about the context, even a peace treaty has become a business. So there was something that took you away from economy and business. So two peoples meeting to find peace. And over the last few days, it has been transformed into a business. But are we crazy? Are we nuts? And this hurts me, because even if a peace treaty is a business, well then also building a house, building a factory, well, everything becomes business. So there's a certain side to this evolution which betrays the real reasons for which man builds. Man builds because he or she needs a shelter from the rain, from the storm, but also to make the world a better place to live, a more poetic place to live, a more beautiful place to live. And all these elements are simply disappearing, but they should be the prerequisites for actions and for drawing and for building. It is not easy to provide a modernity which is also harmony, which is also a sense of search, a quest for the beauty and for the organic, if we do not have a context supporting it. So each time the architect wonders, is it right to proceed this way? Is it right to work this way? Well, the current context, unfortunately, is variable. It is a context that changes more rapidly every day. We are lucky enough to work bearing in mind the memories, the land, the territory of the memory. Well, since architecture has crossed the centuries, it has crossed the wars, the battles, and it still is a signal, an image of a need of men and women to live, to inhabit, to pray, to work as the human activity for the common good. How did you discover, as I asked you earlier, this sacred dimension when you had to draw the Monio Church after a landslide destroying the church? You were asked to think about a new church for Limonio? Well, you said, well, at this point of my life, I would only like to draw churches. So why did you come to such a statement? Well, because a church, par excellence, addresses the spirit. So it is easier to draw a very beautiful church rather than to draw a factory. A factory has pragmatic inputs, whereas a church, for good or bad, is a place that is chosen for a spiritual activity. You enter a church because you're looking for a moment of peace. You're looking for serenity. You're looking for a moment to pray. That's why you enter a church. There's a lady, I've already mentioned this lady, in Seriate, where I designed a church in the outskirts vis-à-vis Bergamo. Well, at the end of a meeting that we had, this lady approached me, an elderly lady. She might have been my mother, but she once approached me and she said, "Thank you, architect. In your church, it is very nice to pray. We pray very well." Well, I remained astonished. It was the better criticism, the best criticism I've ever received. I had always neglected the pragmatic side of the church. You enter a church also to pray, not just to admire the building in itself, where you should enter a church mainly because you want to pray. But as an architect, the reality of the thought, of the thinking of an architect is a different reality, is a different thinking. And she said, "I pray well in the church that you designed." So I was impressed. And the way of the kind of approach that I had towards that specific church, I had some intuitions, of course. For instance, it is in the urban periphery outside the town of Bergamo, so it is in the outskirts of Bergamo. At a certain moment, I had a sort of an enlightenment. I said, well, I want to give these walls a strong appearance. The people coming from these very small houses, not designed by architects, well, these people have never seen such a space. The houses where these people live were built by surveyors, with no fence for surveyors. So I wanted to design something that had a refined appearance. So I decided to make wooden walls with real golden leaves. It seemed, economically, it seemed a crazy thing, but along with the community, we discovered that the golden leaf is so precious and so thin and so easy to apply to the walls that this lady goes to pray to a church which is entirely gilded, so to say. So these ideas come to an architect, starting from a pragmatic element. How should we do this thing? But I could make you loads of examples. So let's listen to your next question. So you say that in a church you never feel alone because it is a place for the community. You've already mentioned this aspect. What does it mean to you designing and building a church today? Has anything changed vis-à-vis to your first assignment when in 1966 you designed the Vigorio convent? Well, the historical times have changed. We now live in a totally different time. So there's a constant mutation, a constant change. The Bigodio Convent and the chapel of the Bigodio Convent, where I made this first design for a chapel. It was a wood warehouse that had to be transformed into a chapel. I used violent colors and shades of the pop art because at that moment, the pop art was the main inspiration for me, first of all, to do. And it was an inspiration for figurative culture to me. So there's fittings. Well, one is red, one is blue, and the tabernacle is gilded, so gold yellow. So it was a historical period that was marked by the general culture of that period. Then, what would you like to know? How do you look at the liturgy in organizing space? Well, liturgy, I learned from Rudolf Schwarz, liturgy is sacred. It is a part of the sacred that needs to work properly. It cannot be, the architect should not invent an ad hoc or alternative liturgy. So from that side, from that point of view, the architect is called upon to respond to an evolution that was present in the liturgy, that is present in the liturgy, but also a very slow transformation that was influenced by the elements of society, of the culture, and of the times. So just to give you an example, this first example that I have never thought about, the Bigorio Chapel, if I look at that chapel and the formal evolution that marked the various churches that I designed in about 20 years, but I drew that 50 years ago. I see that it responds to the requirements and the needs of the society. A church is not an isolated building. It is not isolated from the rest of our lives. The journey among the churches that we've been building over the past 2,000 years is a formal reflection of the society and the culture of the various historical periods. And this is the most difficult side and part of our job, how we are supposed to interpret the historical time using a contemporary kind of language. So which is the contemporary language? I made the example of the pop art back in the 1960s, which inspired me for the colors for that chapel. Today, it is very hard because the artistic world has also become very complex. Artistic trends are very complex. So the difficult aspect of our work today is not inventing a church, and you have a lot of choices amongst the churches from which you can pick. The difficult part is having the proper spirit so that the people entering a church grasp the spirit of their lives. You say that you never feel alone in a church. Well, you can enter a church to pray, to think, to reflect. A church is always a place for the community. It is not an isolated place. So the church is a beautiful place because it is a place for the community. It is a place of the community, and this is another difficult moment. In the past, the different types of churches were experimented In the past, someone decided to put the altar at the center of the church, which was not feasible because you turned your back to someone. So these experiments are welcome, of course, because you managed to find a balance which I find very beautiful when it comes to the architectural culture that has marked the development of the modernity in architecture. Rudolf Schwarz received the advice by Guardini, but he was a master in signaling the major points that resisted from the war to the current period. You built synagogues, churches, and you're also working on a project for a mosque. So which are the teachings that you took from these experiences? Is it different religion? Does a different religion change the idea of space? We were talking about the current, the topical situation and how reality enters your work. You designed the Church of Divine Providence for Lviv. What does it mean to design a sacred, a place of worship for a country at war? So the three monotheistic religions and cultures. Well, these three cultures have a reason for being. So in the liturgical celebrations, they are very different from one another. So the Christian culture, well, we can talk later about this culture. I designed a synagogue in Tel Aviv, where there were very little elements belonging to the sacred. So the readings of the Torah, the reading of the Torah is a reading that you can also do in a living room while you're sipping a tea and you read the Torah. We read the Bible while we sip a tea. So there is no action, no sacred act. Let's think about the difference between the Christian culture, where in the altar, at a certain point of the Mass, there's a transformation of the bread and wine into the body and the blood of Christ, where the worshippers attending the Mass are not simply assisting to that. They are an active part if they are really participating to the Mass. So the transformation of the two examples, so the verses of the Bible may be read in a living room. However, the Christian culture of the transformation of the bread and the wine into the body and the blood of Christ requires a participation whereby the actors and the spectators become protagonists of the Mass. I will not mention the mosque because the mosque is still to be built, so I will not touch upon this example. Can you tell us a little bit of the church in Ukraine? How important it is to build a church in Ukraine today? Well, this project was carried out because the Don Orione Confederation already had some priests in Ukraine, in Lviv, and the war had not broken out yet. The first small convent was built, and then a house to host children in need because they were disabled. And this was made before the war. It was a social kind of action, a social kind of building with no religious purposes. And then the war came about. And so in their general design, they had envisaged the building of a church as well. So they started to build a church, and they are still working to build a church. It is quite a moving kind of experience. I receive videos in my mobile phones where I see the workers that are finishing a ceiling, and then you also listen to the sirens, the alarm sirens, because a bombing is about to take place. So it's quite a moving kind of experience. It is a surprising operation even for the architect. So building in the time of war means turning the works upside down. You always build for something or for someone. War is exactly the opposite. War destroys. War is always against someone. So an attitude of conflict between building and destroying. At that moment, this is very evident. And Don Egidio, Father Egidio, who is there in Ukraine, and I'm in contact with him, he says that there's a social participation because his church is being built in a peripheral area of Lviv, so where many Russian Soviet-era big buildings are located, with a very high degree of poverty, but the participation has never been so huge because people see that someone is building something in a place at war. So they lend a hand. So it's a form of hope. It is a hope for us. It is a sort of a ray of light. You also work with light. So it is like a ray of light in the dark situation such as that of Ukraine. So thinking about your training, I know that you like to imagine, because you say this very often, as neighbors Giotto, Piero della Francesca, and Borromini, but also Morandi and Giacometti. You would like them to be your neighbors. So how do you translate the lessons of these masters? For instance, when we met, you told me that for the San Bucceto church, you took inspiration from the starry sky of the Scrovegni Chapel. Well, I will start from San Bucceto. San Bucceto Church is the latest church that I designed. It is an important church with, in which we worked for over 10 years. How high is it? 30 meters. That's a height. So it's quite impressive. A normal ceiling is 3 meters, so it's 10 times as high. So it's quite impressive. And this 30 meters, you only see the cross, a cross of light, which is the summit. Instead of having a roof, we have a cross of light. I would like to tell you a little bit about how it was born. At a certain point, I had not thought to color the apse. It is a church with 2 apses. It has always been conceived to be built in concrete, reinforced concrete, so gray. Then I don't know why, a set of elements led me to think about the tradition of the Italian Renaissance. The Italian Renaissance was just the opposite of what I had thought at the beginning. There was an immense quantity of apes that were entirely decorated. The life of Jesus Christ, all the important figures of the church. There was an immense kaleidoscope of colors, thinking about the Renaissance churches. So at a certain time, my best thought come during the night. During the night, specifically, I said to myself, I am wrong if I continue to think about reinforced concrete. So in the Swiss tradition, you have, in the modernist Swiss tradition, you normally have a white scenario, so to say, a white background. So I was certain that it would be successful because I had already designed many churches like that. I talked about this with Bruno Forte, and Bruno Forte told me, well, I'm a friend of Spalletti. Spalletti is an excellent artist. So he organized a meeting. Spalletti came to the church. We had a tour of the church, and he asked me, what would you like? What do you want from me? And I said, I want you to paint this church because it seems to me that I'm betraying the culture to leave reinforced concrete becoming entirely white. I don't want it to be in total white. So when he came to the building yard, he answered, I've thought about your proposal, and I'm not willing to do it. I will spoil the church if I paint it, as you were asking me. After 2 months, Spalletti died. So I was orphan of a thought rather than a painting. So I remained without a thought. The idea of the Italian Renaissance and all the many pictures that I had in my mind, but everything was missing. Everything was disappearing. So during another night, I thought, okay, I will paint it. I no longer have any time. Inauguration was in 2 months' time. We were running out of time. We were running out of money. So I decided that I would be the one to paint the church. So I painted the church. I took 2 language loans, so to say, a picture by Klee, by Paul Klee, a painting by Paul Klee, and the stars of the Scrovegni Chapel that I had visited because I wanted to take inspiration from that. So I put them together, and I called 10 painters, house painters. So they placed all the scaffoldings, because we are talking about a church whose height is 30 meters. I decided to paint it along with 10 house painters. The amount of money needed was very limited. I only had to spend money for the paint. So now and then, this is what happens. Even in the most precious points or the most emblematic parts of your work, they become the reasons for going beyond what you were thinking at the beginning. This was something that nobody had wanted. I didn't think about it in the beginning, but all of this work was an inspiration for painting the church. And Bruno Forte made me another correction. The 3 apses were of the same size. And several years before, Bruno Forte told me, you're wrong. The central apse needs to be bigger than the others because you need to create a hierarchy of the apses. So he was a partner in crime, so to say. So we share the responsibility between myself and Bruno Forte. Luscam, Le Corbusier and Scarpa were of fundamental importance in your apprenticeship. What did you keep from each of them since you met them and you worked with all of them while you were a very young architect? Well, 3 monsters, 3 masters. Scarpa, because he had a sensitivity when it comes to materials. Le Corbusier was a monster, so to say, because he made the history of architecture of the 20th century. You cannot speak about architecture if you do not mention Le Corbusier. And we can, the last one I met for a small amount of time, we met 2 or 3 times between the States and Venice. Well, he was prophetic. Louis Kahn had something that he didn't say, but nonetheless you perceived that what he said had a prophetic strength. He spoke a lot about the extent to which architecture or architectural works prefer silence. And in his reasonings, he always shifted the margins of discussion towards element going beyond the finite. So he was a prophet for architecture, at least in my opinion. So I owe these 3 monsters many of the intuitions I have, and I've learned a lot from them all. I also learned to be humble. You need to be humble to carry out this kind of work. So 3 monsters, 3 masters who didn't have an absolute hierarchy. Those who approached them knew very well all the masterpieces that I had created, but nonetheless, they were very humble. Humility is one of the victims of the arrogance of power. So from this point of view, the teaching of the 20th century and of culture within the society of consumption and opulence and affluence seems to me that these 3 masters remain pillars of humility, humbleness, and knowledge. Would you like to read something? Well, I brought a text, and I would like to read the text. If you want, I can read it. Le Corbusier used to say, it is time to let emerge an intuition coming from assimilated and acquired experiences, maybe forgotten and re-emerged in an awareness-related way. The architectural work can evoke it today, now. It can address those who deserve it, those who enter into harmony with the world created by the work. Then we have a depth which erases walls, eliminates contingent presences, and makes the miracle of the space which cannot be said. I would say the sacred space. Louis Kahn. I love the beginnings. I love the spirit within the beginning. It is a marvelous moment for any event, in any time. Because in the beginning, you find the seed for all the things that must come afterwards. Something cannot start unless it does not include in itself everything that it can offer. So it seems to me that these are 2 prophecies which, in this very moment, and during this meeting as well, are worth reading literally for what they said, because they can provide lots of food for reflections and for doing, for acting. So here at the meeting, there's a beautiful exhibition on the Romanesque style that we will visit afterwards, and on the importance to observe Romanesque churches not only as memories of the past, but as a living source for a new way of building, a new world to be built. You said that the Romanesque style was your school of architecture. I studied architecture because I knew the Romanesque churches in the Lombardy region, and I was fascinated by them when I was a child, when I was very young. How important is that memory, and how does it generate new shapes for the contemporary period? Well, I said earlier that in addition to the modern culture, there's a memory kind of territory, a territory linked to the memories, which for an artist or for a normal man should come into the fore. We are also a past. We cannot live only in the contemporary period. I live because I remember something. So the past is something that cannot be defined because of its complexity, but which is also present in the soul of every one of us. And the Romanesque style, to come to your question, the Romanesque style, to me, is a precise reference for the language, for the absolute nature of the language, and for the essentiality of the forms, for the purity of the images. And it is a synthesis that lasted for quite a long period of time, which is still there. It is still present because these buildings are made of stone. They do not burn, as is the case for other churches that responded to more modern cultures, such as the Baroque period, and therefore they are points of reference even for the future. So can we consider the light the real protagonist of your work, a generating element? Well, the light is a generating element of the space. Without light, you have no space. Therefore, light, the most different forms of light, a side light or a central light, each one can develop light as he or she likes. But without light, you have no space. So in a church, in the sacred element, how important is light in building an emotion? Well, I've experimented many things, and I have to say that the San Buceto church, having a 30-meter by 30-meter Greek cross, is the only illumination for the entire church. It is so essential that you need to come to terms with that. You have no windows in that church. So indirectly, those entering the church look for the cross. So talking about churches, in your latest interview for Trace, to talk about your coming to the meeting, you talked about the story of this Sewu priest, which is quite a miraculous story. Well, please tell us. Well, about 15 years ago, after an appointment that I had, I spoke with a priest. I call it Pretino. He is he's a short in size. So I met him, and I had a collaborator from Korea, so he spoke Korean, and he translated because that priest only spoke Korean. So I needed an interpreter, I needed a translator. And he told me, I want to build a church with you. And I said, okay, perfect. But you need three things to build a church. You need the land. So he took out a map, and he told me, I've just bought, in 30 years of my activity, I managed to buy, piece by piece, an entire valley. So I have an entire valley. You have an entire valley. This is the land. The land is there. So it was even too big for me. Then the second thing that is needed, I said, is a theme. I will give you the theme. A Christian church. And then the third condition is that we need a bit of money. And he answered, I have no problems when it comes to money. I have zero money, so I have no problems. So this priest was a holy priest, I would say, because with zero money, he managed to have a church built. I think it will be inaugurated next year, I think, or during the Young People Symposium, which will be held in Korea next year. And, well, he managed to raise funds. I made a calculation, about $20 million. He managed to raise all these funds. So, well, he was quite a big priest. Don't tell Trump. Otherwise, he will be nominated bishop immediately. So just to tell you that from my side, well, I decided to listen to this priest who had no money at all. He said, there are no problems when it comes to money. Money for a project that is shared by the community will be found. You don't worry, because I will manage to find the money. So the church is a community. Church is always a living community, conveying hope, and so everybody will contribute. It is indeed a community, a living community. The last question on my part, and then I will ask you a couple of questions. I received lots of questions from people working here in the meeting. We have lots of architects wishing to ask you questions. My last question is personal, a personal question. So talking about the sacred aspects, I know about your family, education, your mother, your aunts, your house. So I ask you, how does this attraction to the sacred translate into your relationship with God? It is true that you design churches for communities all around the world. But when it comes to you,
my own God embodies the sacred. That's my answer. When I talk about my own God, my God embodies the idea of sacred. And this is how I read it, how I interpret it. And I can listen or not listen. And God is the best good of all. It's the best harmony ever. The best of the best. I believe that God is embodied by all these positive values. Okay, now let's go with the questions that were sent. I'll just give you a couple, although many questions have been asked. Francesco from Rimini is asking, in your sacred architecture, you are saying that light is fundamental, as we said before. Oftentimes, there are cuts on the covers from very high up, which are very far away. An abstract light which is over man and space. In the symbolic world of Christianity, light is God. God defined himself as the light of the world, and all the Christian architecture up to Baroque says so. What is your relation between light and space? What do you think about it? With no light, there is no space, basically, as I said before. So maybe he's making reference to the Church of San Bucetto. In that case, I wanted to exacerbate the problem of light and not just give a light, but give a shape to light. And the shape of the light is a cross. And so whoever enters that church can see some form of violence. Architects always use violence, and whoever enters that church is attracted by light, and whoever walks outside at night, there's an airport just nearby, and whoever passes by, you can see that there's a church there. You can immediately understand there's a church there. My name is Benedetta Fontana. I'm an architect dealing with sacred architecture. In your projects, you make stronger formal choices, such as the heptagonal plant in Turin. The external shape recalling chimneys, or the use of multiple apsides with no references to Christ or Trinity. What symbols are you referring to in your solutions? Well, the heptagon, which means 7 sides, is not as lucky as the octagon. Because many churches have the shape of an octagon. Well, I chose the heptagon for a very simple reason, because, well, first and foremost, it's not a central layout. It's a directed layout. When you enter from the entrance, at the end, you find the 7 apps, because there are 3 on one side, and there's another 3 on the other side. There's a central one. And it was strange that even the architectural tradition has rarely used it. Has rarely used the heptagon, because the heptagon gives you exactly the direction, the one single direction, and you immediately are on the central apse. So that reason was enough for me to use the lateral chapels and use the heptagon to give a direction. Gaudi says that in order to be original, you have to be loyal to the origins. Gaudi says that in order to be original, you have to be faithful to the origin. I don't know whether I'm original or not, honestly. There's many problems with aesthetics, and we can discuss a lot about it. If architecture is a way to reflect upon the deep men's needs, what is still needed in our departments of architecture at university to discover the depth of mankind? Well, everything is lacking, I would say. What is lacking? Everything is lacking, I would say. And there should be, for example, courses on humanities where men is the focus, not just religious men, but even the layman. The layman has to find once again its key role in spaces, and first and foremost, the spaces of cities. Okay. Thank you very much to architect Botta. Thank you. Each one of us can contribute to the meeting. So each donation is a new brick to continue building together, meeting places of meeting, beauty, and hope. And the fair, you can find the Dona Ora desks, donate now with a red heart. We remind you that the Meeting Foundation is a third sector entity, and so you can detract your donation from your tax declaration. Thank you very much to Mario Botta, and have a safe journey back to Switzerland. Thank you very much to all of you.
È un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si
che
batte.
approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo
proporre con la propria vita
esiste anche grazie a te.